So what I'm going to do before I start painting this, since I sketched this as a bunch of graphite on there, I've got a nice, clean, dry, flat brush. And I'm going to just do some housekeeping, do a little sweeping around the place. Just dust it off. That way I don't get a lot of graphite in the paint as I'm working. Better mess up these other ones. Lay down the first layer. Now, as I look at this photo, I see that, bam, it is bright yellow, and so I can confidently do a bright yellow wash over most of it. I do see some areas shining on these leaves here that are white, so I want to leave those alone. I'm just isolating the group of fruits in front and the leaves that are connected to it. So just a few of the leaves is fine. If you want to get into doing the rest of that photo, that's on you. So I think that I can confidently put down a milk wash of warm yellow, and that is going to saturate everything enough for me to keep going. In the area that I'm focused on, I don't see a lot of cooler greens except for maybe in some of the shadow of this one right here, but that can all be achieved through glazes of individual colors, which I'll show you as we go through the process. So right now I feel confident that as long as I take care not to wash over the white on the leaf shining here, and a little bit over here, I'll be all right. I think that before I start though, my sketch looks a little weird because I traced it, and I want to make sure that those areas are crisp. I've got a nice, fresh, clean Tombow eraser here. So, well, it's not that clean, but it's got some clean edges. If you ever need to clean your eraser, you just rub it, and then the stuff comes off. But I've got a nice, clean, sharp little corner here. I wanted to clean up the shine on this kind of broken, folded leaf there. I didn't see it too well. I love these erasers because they really will erase just about anything. But be careful as you erase when you get those little boogers from the eraser that you don't use your hands to take it off of the paper, because it will get your paper all dirty and messed up. This is fine. I'm fine with that little tracing. This part over here, I think I can kind of make out where things are. So as I paint, I just want to be careful. I do see a little bit more white on this side of the leaf as well. So I'm just going to have to paint that area carefully as I go through and do a nice yellow wash on this whole thing. So let me mix up some paint. I'm going to go with a size 6 brush on this, because I see a round brush, because I see some areas that are pretty tiny that I'm going to need to get into. The nice thing is that it's pretty much all positive space in this one, so I don't have to worry about, other than those white areas. Ooh, that's yellow. Ooh, that's hot. We'll go for it. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top so I don't get my hands all over it. And I'm going to very carefully outline those white areas. If you were looking at the other painting video with the little round green leaves, there's a part in there too where you're outlining some white areas. So using a round brush that has enough of an edge, meaning, you know, it has this kind of thin pointy point to it for you to get around those little tiny areas, it will really help. So make sure you're using a round brush that has a nice sharp point. and that it's the right size for the job. When you're washing, you use something a little bit bigger for the job because you, my head's not getting in the way. Because you got to cover a lot of surface area. But once you get into smaller details, you need something that's going to be thin enough to get around everything. Make sure there's no other white areas I want to take care of. And as you fill in areas, make sure that you keep your working edge wet and pick up little puddles as you go. Now, we're doing this with the board laid flat because there's so many details. It's kind of, if you painted this at an angle, the paint would run too fast. And that pressure could push you into painting over something you didn't mean to. So, or, you know, a full bead of liquid kind of bursting into another area that you're trying to isolate. So painting flat is good for detail work. Now when I get around to these fruits, I'm going to be careful of their outlines because this is the edge for me. I'm not going to paint the background. Some kind of stems and then another fruit. And I noticed there's a fruit behind one of these that I didn't quite pick up in my initial drawing, so I'll make sure to paint that in later. If you didn't draw something, it's okay. You're going to paint it. So just put it in when you paint it. Now again, I'm going to pick up some of that extra liquid. Even though I really want these to be a nice vibrant yellow, I'm not going to get that on the first pass. And if I try to push it there too soon, it's going to make it harder to paint everything else. I can come in with darker values on a glaze and start to get that spherical look, which I'll show you once this dries. They call that painting short, where you kind of start with a larger area, you let it dry, you come back in with the same paint in a little bit smaller area. Helps you get some of those gradients you're going for. Okay, so it looks like I was careful around my white areas as best as I could be. I got some yellow to push everything up. Most of these greens are a nice yellow, so even the whites on the greens have yellow in them. So this will be a nice base, kind of a level 1, level 2 for me to build onto once this part dries. So I'm going to get a nice puddle of some warm yellow and test that. It's nice and bright and warm. You know, I really love how it almost gets into a yellow-orange in these areas, but I think if I introduce some red, I might go too far. So instead, I'm going to use a nice coffee wash of that warm yellow, and I'm going to try to define some of the darker values that I see around the edge of the fruit. Then what I can do with a brush that's been cleaned and kind of patted down is I can dry brush some of those edges to get them softer. You don't want to have this sharp dark line indicating shadow unless that's what's in the photo. And what I see in the photo is that these fruits are nice and soft. And so it's the kind of thing that a dry brush with just a little bit of pigment on it, you know, existing from what I just painted, and kind of soften some of that and create the highlight that you want on that little sphere. I think I've got too much pigment on my brush though, so I'm going to clean it off. See if I can kind of tap it. Careful you don't introduce more water as you kind of scrub and scumble in those areas. So that's nice. Get into the edge of this last fruit right here. So that yellow is the local color. And then the area that's lighter yellow is where the highlight is. And then below that, we're going to get into the core shadow. Now, you'd be tempted in this stage to keep pushing, you know, thicker yellow, but it's not going to make it darker. It's just going to make it more vibrant. And then you get to a point where there's no added vibrancy you can get. And so for these fruits, they're going to need a little bit of coolness in the form of some violet. So I took a little bit of violet into my yellow, and then I'm going to just tap a little bit into the bottom areas of the fruit. While that area is still wet, then what I can do is, using my brush, I can move the pigment around, soften it a bit, get it where I want it to be. That's nice. Now I need to cut in with all these greens and stuff, but this is still wet. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to wait. One way to plan your layers is to look at how many levels you have in a painting. If you're going all the way from 0 to 6 and with everything in between, you have to do more layers and spots. In some, you can start to paint short, where you're carving in little smaller details as it's drying. But for some of these sharper edges, where you really need a wet on dry process, you have to plan out the darkening stages of your painting. So for this one, it is super bright here, and then it gets really dark really fast. I want to try to find those lightest green values, which are so hard to define because they're right next to the white areas. They're very tiny. So this green has a lot of that yellow in it, and we do have a yellow base there, so we don't have to add a lot of yellow to this green. I'm going to start out with some Prussian blue. I'm going to add some warm yellow. And I want to make some thick paint because this one darkens up really quick and there's not a lot of layers required. The paint I've made is so light. And I think a little bit of burnt umber in there can give me a little more naturalism and a little bit more value. Let's see. Okay, that's a nice place to start. Let me get into a smaller brush. Always make sure your brushes are clean. I'm jumping around through all 6 examples right now in between, so I'm really trying to be careful about isolating color, keeping my pigments pure and things like that. But I'm going to try to lay down a layer of green. Let me see again. Gosh, this green is so light. I really don't think it's what I want yet. Get some more pigment in there. That burnt umber is going to help keep things looking natural and kind of counteract some of the blue that's in here. Warm yellow. Sorry, I'm on the side mixing paint. And I just want it to be the right thickness. I'm running out of tester space. Okay, that's a better thickness. It's just not quite as yellow as I want. So I'm going to add some yellow. That's good because I do need to thick it out a little bit more. There we go. You start to see on your working palette how thick it is by the way it moves. When your brush goes through it, you can see the white below. It's kind of, you know, it's a little thicker. Okay, let's try to lay down a green wash and see what happens. I'm going to try to isolate my white areas, and then I'm also going to try to define these fruits here. There's some kind of stems and stuff and a leaf up here that I want to watch out for. The leaf up there is pretty yellow. Now let's see if I can get around some of this stuff here. Now there's a yellow vein in the middle of these leaves, so I gotta watch for that. See if I can kind of define that as I go. This green is not as bright as I would like it to be. Trying to keep those white highlights prominent as I fill in all the green space. There's also some nice cast shadow in parts of this photo that will be fun. But let's get a layer of green on, and then we can go in and put all those fun details in. When you have an area of light value and then an area of dark value, you don't need to draw or paint a line around it, because the barrier between the two is definition enough, and it makes sense in reality. Most things aren't outlined, so we don't draw or paint outlines. We've got to be careful though, because you know, we grow up kind of outlining everything, and we have a tendency, I mean, it makes it so much easier. You look at all these little, like, edges, you know, you want to I feel like I want to outline them first and then fill in. But with watercolor, you get those edges where the paper dries before you come back. Oh no, I just covered that leaf area. That's what I get for chit-chatting on the job. See if I can clean that up. You know, it's not a complete loss. It's supposed to get really dark around it, so I think I can salvage that. This is the kind of painting that, while painting it, I'm sitting here going, gosh, I wish I could push this painting up faster, but this is going to be another layer at least. I'm trying to do the painting up here on this leaf kind of lighter than down below, because it has a lot of yellow in it in the photo. And then these little things right here, I just going to leave alone. Okay, that's a good second layer, I think. Although I notice that there's kind of a little bit more dark space between the two fruits. Let's see if I can put that in. When we look at negative space in our sources, it helps us to define them better, because sometimes when you're looking at the round fruit, you become blind to something else near it. So if you look at the space between things, you can find the boundaries and shapes you're trying to create. Okay, that looks nice so far, so good. I'm sorry I can't show you as much detail as I'd like to show you, but this is a beginning class, and so the level that I'm rendering these paintings to is, you know, what I would expect of you, so that's why I'm not going all aggro. I love to paint, but like I said in some other video, I could be here all day doing this stuff. Now is the point where I really need to focus. I'm going to not talk. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do first. I want to go into all these areas, these little veins and stuff, where it gets a bit darker and shows me that those areas are concave or convex. So I'm going to use that same green, that local value, local color, but in a thicker consistency. And then as I layer up, it's going to darken it up for me. So let me see. I know there's shadow there, but I'm coming right to the edge of that leaf. I'm going to put the shadow in on the next layer. I'm pulling from the source puddle. That's the driest part of the puddle to really get that thick paint. The leaf behind it is mostly in shadow in the next shape, so I'm going to carry this darkness over. I see some areas on the side where I defined lighter greens, so I'm going to make sure that I take care of that. This one up here too doesn't really have, oops, that's okay. There's just a bite out of the leaf now. I'm looking at the photo upside down, and hopefully my head isn't blocking my painting. Oh my gosh. Let's try to pick some of that up. Oops, that's okay. We'll come back and fix that with some shadow. Anyways, I was over here, right? Continue to define that edge of the fruit. Every time we go around it, it reinforces that shape. There's some lighter areas there I wanted to respect as it comes around. That nice white shiny part of the leaf I want to preserve. But you'll notice on some of those areas I'm kind of not painting right up to the edge of the white area, and that's what painting short refers to. It's kind of short stopping around those edges to show that the local color is getting lighter and lighter. Now this leaf is in shadow. It's going to be behind this brighter one, so I can go behind it, and then let me just try to define this a little bit more clearly. Oh yeah, that folded over leaf part is just down. Here, there it is. We made it its own thing. And then a little bit shadow in here can help. Just pulling from the wet paint that's already there, I can start to carve some of that with negative space. And then the leaf up top I said was already really yellow and in a lot of light, but it does have kind of a shadow on it. Right there. That's good. And then I can kind of define a little bit. I see some kind of veins in here that I wanted to highlight. Also, this looks a little light for what's going on around it, to be honest. So I'm going to kind of pull it all down a bit right there. Okay. Really close. I think that one more layer of the darkest values is going to get me pretty much to where I want to be on this one. Okay. This is dry. Let's try one more layer of green with this. I'm going to have to get myself some new brushes, I can tell. Yay, it's at Christmas when I get new brushes. Okay. I feel like this green could be pushed in some areas as shadow, and so what I would like to do is add a little bit of cool red to my green. And it's going to make kind of a brown, but it'll be nice and dark. And it'll be the kind of shadow that's supposed to be on these leaves. So let's see if this makes it look like reality. I really want to make sure I get the shadow correct though. Okay, I'm going for it. Kind of gets jagged right here, I think. Just a little as it goes over a leaf. And then it curves around this one. And it defines the edge of this one. Oh, my head's not in the shot for this. Then it kind of comes around that way. There's also a little bit of shadow between these two leaves. And I have to kind of define the edge of that leaf because I almost lost it. So there we go. It can be darker. Faux show. So hopefully I can just charge in that pigment right there. Nice. Oh, it's starting to look like real light. I love it when that happens. There's some shadow on this leaf too that was a little darker. Oh, it's very dark. It's okay. But then I can come in on some of this right here where it was a little bit darker. And then there's that little weird leaf there. That gets a little bit of shadow too. And that shadow is going to come up. Oh man, I'm really chunking away at these fruits, aren't I? Filling that shadow space there. Nice. And then there was that like weird twisty leaf piece that had a shadow, right? Let's try to define it a little. That shadow goes right along the edge of the leaf, so it's kind of nice. Where is it? Oh, I see. Kind of pulls up like that. And it gets a little bit bigger on this leaf here. You know, these small details of where things go, like shadows and stuff, it's hard to see it at first blush. But when you start to paint and examine and study your subject matter, you start to see those things. So now I can tell that my little fruits probably need a bit more shadow. I have a nice shadow on my brush already, and this space is kind of already touching the fruit, so I can just kind of pull some of that pigment over. A little bit up here. And then one of these fruits with some greens getting in there. That's okay. This fruit has like a little black thing on it, but I want to be careful because I already wet that area. Let me see what I got on my palette that I can kind of pop in there just a touch. Okay,